Ed Calderon, nice to meet you, my friend.
Nice to meet you.
He's a security, adjust the mic a little bit, get it down a little bit to you. Yeah, that's good. Security specialist, combatives instructor, so we'll have that to discuss, but you know Mexico well, born and raised in Tijuana. So, and I'm very curious as to what's going on in Mexico, and it doesn't get a lot of coverage out here, surprisingly. I was preparing for you a little bit, and I realized, I went and looked it up, we have 5,500 miles of border with Canada and a little under 2,000, I think, with Mexico, which I was just surprised about. We don't seem to have any issues with the double the border in Canada, or a few less than we have with Mexico. So let's just start from the start. Born in Tijuana?
Born in Tijuana, raised in Tijuana. That's where I get my English. If you're born in the border, you have to get that English, or else job market's pretty small.
Yeah, and I used to go to Tijuana when I was like, it's funny because I'm like 18 years older than you, and I used to go to Tijuana when I was like 18 and 19. So it's like when you were born, I was going to Revolution Avenue and trying to go to strip clubs in TJ.
Yeah, well, it's still there. Revolution is pretty much touristy dead, but the the red light district is still very much alive. So.
All those strip bars, you'd walk down the stairs. Yeah. They're kind of down in the basement. So there'd be like a restaurant on the top floor, but underground. Yeah. Margarita's Village. They're
still there. There's a big one. They call the nickname is the consulate. That's what the code word is. Yeah.
So you grow up there. How do you grow up there?
Family of three, Catholic. Mm-hmm. A really conservative type raised up, and punk kid. Used to listen to you on 91X growing up.
FM Baja California.
Yeah.
91X. I do believe, Dawson, you could probably figure this out. They had their transmitter in Mexico, and thus they could boost up the signal. And thus, when I lived in the Hollywood Hills, I couldn't get the K-Rock signal from Los Angeles, but I could get 91X from San Diego.
Yeah.
At 91X from Santa Barbara as well, because it's a straight shot across the water.
So they literally just put their thing across the border and then turned up the volume.
But yeah, all of the Tijuana stations are X's.
Yeah, that's
right?
That's why you would hear the Mexican national anthem at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a famous
heard it on the X
ZZ Top song. Yeah. I heard it on that Mexican radio. So there's also a Wall of Voodoo song called Mexican. All right, let's not digress. So you grow up in Tijuana, which just seems like a crazy place to grow up.
It's pretty crazy. It wasn't as violent as it is, let's say 20 years back.
Mm-hmm.
It was lively, but just it was basically the whole nightlife thing was the only thing that was going on down there.
Yeah. In Tijuana, as soon as you get off the main drag, there's just lots of beat up old houses and stuff. Like it gets pretty rural.
Now it's not that much. Now it's high rises and a lot of houses that are pretty,
oh, really?
high end. The most of the people that work in San Diego that are Americans live down in TJ. So
oh, really?
That's how they get around the rental stuff.
So the cartels, Mexico. Do you consider it a narco state?
Yeah, well, it's in parts.
In parts.
When I started working, I worked for the government, doing law enforcement. Since I was 21, I started working.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I noticed is basically the whole the government doesn't rule in certain parts of Mexico. You would go to places like downtown Tijuana, and you would see a convoy of 4 Suburbans and guys with rifles out the windows, and you would say, well, that must be like a high-level politician or, somebody important. And then it turned out to be the head of the Arellano Felix cartel going out to eat at a Fridays that was down there or something,
Really?
Yeah. And the cops would basically just, look the other way, and nobody would do anything. So what you learn quickly is that some of these cartel groups rule or basically have sway over what the government does in certain places.
Well, there was a couple of incidents. There was the Mormon families who were all shot up. There was that crazy El Chapo's son thing where they sort of gave him back.
Yeah.
Let's take those two stories just as an illustration of what's going on over there. Where do they physically take place?
So the Mormon massacre happened in the state of Sonora, which I actually last weekend I was over there. Just came back from there. It's a very large state. It's part of a very important drug route into the United States. Basically, it's a lot of wilderness, desert wilderness. And in the area where this Mormon massacre occurred, there's a very big cartel proxy group. Basically, how the cartels work, specifically the Sinaloa cartel, is it's a federation of smaller groups. Basically, they all kind of get into alignment. We're going to move your stuff through this place, so we need security here. We can do that. So there's this allyship, and that is one of the richest drug routes right now. So the way I heard it, and everybody has a different story. There's a lot of Mormon. There used to be a lot because they're kind of getting out of Dodge now. There used to be a lot of Mormon colonies down there, and there still are a few. Escaping Utah to be more Mormon or whatever.
Sure.
So a lot of these colonies basically are Mexican American, dual citizenship groups. They were apparently on their way to a wedding. And they were driving around in Suburbans and SUVs through this desert, and they made a wrong turn somewhere. The only people that drive around in Suburbans and large SUVs in that area are usually government forces or cartel guys. So apparently there was some misidentifying circumstances that happened, and they were ambushed.
Who did the cartel think they were? A rival?
Rival cartel group moving in their area. There's a lot of stuff that moves in that environment. Drugs, people. There's a fight going on right now between that Sinaloa cartel proxy and a cartel that comes out of Juarez that called the Linea, right? So there's a lot of movement in the area. And all of a sudden you see this convoy of vehicles or this vehicle just in the middle of nowhere going through your cartel route. And, some of the guys that are basically just there waiting for, things to happen, shot the cars up.
Wouldn't you think that the Mormons would be a little more savvy to that, what you just described? Like, hey man, when you hop in a Suburban and you go through this neighborhood, you're going to look like, I'm not blaming them, obviously, but why didn't they who know the lay of the land over there, why?
Sonora is currently in the midst of a turf war that is about 2 years old. And it wasn't as common in Sonora. So,
I see.
So it was common, where most of the Mormon colonies are in Chihuahua and stuff like that, but not there. So it was like a surprise to a lot of people that happened.
Right.
Some of the security forces that saw it thought it was targeted, and there's theories out there of all kinds. And I take my narrative from people there. So,
but you have intel from people that are on the ground, right?
From both people that live in the area to some of the people that responded initially to some people that talk about the people that did that massacre were all basically executed that same night for their big mistake and for attracting that much heat to the area.
When they execute the people that shot up the Mormons, the cartel then does, do they do it to send a message like, hey, here's what happens when you fuck up, or do they do it to make sure nobody talks about it?
I think a bit of both.
Bit of both?
Yeah. I mean, it basically attracted international attention to the area.
Right.
Which is not good for business at all. It makes things harder.
Is fentanyl their thing now? Like, what are they selling? We legalized pot or decriminalized it or whatever. There used to be pot. Now there's not so much pot. So they switched to fentanyl?
Yeah, funny enough, they're still moving pot for some reason across the border. They're also growing it illegally in public lands in the U.S., which is, again, weird. But
in the U.S.?
Yeah. California public lands. There's a few places that cartels basically grow weed up here and sell it up here illegally.
So what would be... So a couple things. what can be so? How would you classify Mexico in general? What let's say 10 is Switzerland. Like everyone's got insurance and they get along, and there's not a lot of murders and things like that. And 1 will be the worst province in Africa or something. Lots of drug lords, or lots of warlords and infighting and all that. What number would you give Mexico?
I'd say we're somewhere in the 6 right now.
6,
right? And it's a large country, so you can go, one part of the country like Sinaloa, where basically the cartel rescued one of their cartel heads, riding around in technicals with Syrian level weaponry and armored trucks with the machine guns on the back, and they basically beat the Mexican army. Like that, you go from that to a very metropolitan Mexico City where not a lot of stuff happens. It's pretty safe, and there's a lot of money there. But there's this big contrast between states and states. If you're on the way to where drugs are grown, are distributed, and are trafficked into the U.S., your state is literally, that's when you get, that's when you get problems. And that's a lot of states right now, though. That's why you see flare-ups in places like Sonora, like Baja here in TJ right now. It's I think it's last year was the second highest murder rate in the country, right? It's basically, if you're in a drug route or a drug corridor, it's open season in the area.
What can the U.S. do?
Well, first off, there was this big push recently by the president to use the classification of cartels as a terrorist organization as a leverage point to kind of deal with the Mexican government. The Mexican government right now is led by a leftist president named Andrés Manuel López Obrador, right? So he's, he ran on an anti-American platform and, very, very to the left. And, there's this thing with labeling the cartels as a terrorist organization came up after the Mormon massacre. Mm-hmm. But if you do the math and you see how many Americans have actually been killed in drug-related, cartel-related situations in the world, those are just a few. He stepped it back, He said, we're going to work more on, bilateral.
Trump walked it back. Right.
Walked it back. And, there's a lot of people argue against it, that the cartels are not a terrorist group because they don't fall within the parameters of a terrorist group. Mainly they don't have political aims. But they actually do. Mexico has I think one of the largest numbers of political candidates being murdered or assassinated. A large number of members of the press get killed down there
by the cartels
to influence, or because they are talking about things that you shouldn't talk about, to influence elections. So they definitely have they definitely have candidates that they want, or political motives to kind of use their violence to move it forward. So, they fit that narrative.
So what is a strategy that the United States should adopt? Are we talking border wall? Are we talking border security of a different form? Are we talking about legalizing fentanyl? Like what can we do?
So, like border wall, you say that when the last caravan showed up on that Tijuana border, security was raised. Barbed wire came up. They put a bunch of razor wire from Camp Pendleton. The Marines put a bunch of razor wire on the border that was later stolen by some of the people in TJ, and they put it in their houses, which is pretty kind of funny. But drug prices remained completely stable, right? So that tells you that border security and border wall doesn't do a lot specifically for drugs, right? So that's part of a solution maybe, but that's not really the whole solution. Maybe for immigration, but for drugs, I don't see it.
Is everything drugs, and then how much of it is prostitution or human trafficking, or what do we got?
Human trafficking, drugs, pirated merchandise, extortion rackets all across the country. Money laundering. They own legit property and legit businesses as well. There's a clear connection with China as far as stuff coming into Mexico. Fentanyl is a big thing right now.
Which is produced in China?
Some of it is actually now being produced in laboratories that were probably Chinese started, and they handed it over to somebody in Mexico. So a lot of the fentanyl is actually now being produced in Mexico as well. It's been so for a while. Main thing is that the heroin that they grow down there isn't as good as the heroin they grow up in the Afghani mountains. So it's something to do with the soil. The process they do is different. So they need to kind of give it a kick. So instead of adding a shot of espresso, they added a shot of fentanyl to it. That's why you're seeing this epidemic up here.
What modality are the bulk of the drugs physically crossing the border in, or give us the top three? Specifically
talking to people that I've actually, I've arrested some of these people, and I've talked to some of these people after, now working as writing for a few magazines, so I get to interview them now with not a lot of pressure. They basically go for a shotgun pattern, that's what they call it. You have a load of drugs, and you come up with different ways of crossing it, and you do the math, and eventually some of them will get across. So kids in cars with actual American passports crossing from Mexico to the U.S., that's some of it. Drug tunnels, insane drug tunnels that go across the border.
What's the longest, most?
They just discovered the longest one in history, I think, and I don't know exactly how long it is, but it's pretty long.
Well, look it up, Chris. I'd be curious about that.
That's a recent one that was found.
Let me just jump in and say that it's sort of like when people go, how do you do the stock market? And you go, well, I have a diversified portfolio. I have some utilities and I have some tech companies. And so that's what they do. It's not like we're not going to put it all in one semi-truck.
Drones. They found catapults,
catapults.
Trebuchet, yeah, they found some of those. Small planes, just people duct taping it to their stomach. So they basically just let's see what makes it.
There's no one artery to choke off. It's coming in all different directions.
Probably the bulk of everything is going through sea and under the ground. I think they also found a bunch of these ghetto submarines basically that just semi-submersibles.
Yeah, because they can't run electric underwater. People with submarines, when they run with no air, you can't run an internal combustion engine with no air, so you got to run electrical.
Well, they also have found small submersibles as well, like legit submersibles.
Wow.
that traced back. I remember we found one somewhere in Ensenada, and apparently it traced back to an online sale on eBay or something, right? So
they're a relentless group, and longest drug tunnel ever was discovered in January, so that's just last month.
Yeah, 70 feet beneath a small industrial building in Tijuana.
70, but I don't, when people say 70 feet, they don't know what 70 feet is. That's 7 stories.
Yeah.
You stand underneath a 7-story building and look up. That's deep.
Interesting details about that tunnel. I don't know if it says there in the article, but I know from people that were, part of that. That tunnel was probably 20 years old, 15, maybe 15 years old. So it worked.
Right. How far did it go across?
About 12 football fields, a little less than a mile.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jesus.
That's probably $3 million worth of work there.
That's a lot of hand digging, man.
Well, it had a railway, plumbing, and ventilation.
Yeah, that's what you need. Also, whoever dug that tunnel probably is buried somewhere in that tunnel as well.
They don't like those people out there talking about the tunnels they were working on?
No, not at all. The only ones that survive usually are the engineers. Usually people from the mining industry from Mexico.
Oh, really? They use real engineers.
Yeah. That tunnel looks almost very similar to the one that Chapo used to escape, but it's probably made by some of the same people.
Jesus Christ. And you have to get some decent equipment and some technology and everything. So everything is take the silver or take the lead, right?
Yeah.
And is that kind of the big problem?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's first off, there's no. I came up with this nickname for Mexico. I call it the upside down, right? Mm-hmm. People are like, Ed, I want to go with my family down to Cabo, and I know it's things happen. What are the legalities of carrying around a pocket knife in Mexico? Just carry around a pocket knife because they want to defend themselves. Well, I said, it's an interesting question. In some parts of Mexico, $5,000 will get you out of a manslaughter charge.
Right.
But it's a bribe.
Sure.
So that's you'll start from there. It's rule of law is not it's not a blanket statement down there. There's just a cultural dimension to everything that has corruption. Things get greased. It's a very upside down kind of place.
Is there any? I've talked about it before on my podcast, which is if there's corruption, it's really difficult to grow a nation. And this holds true for some of these Baltic republics and stuff like that, like in Africa and stuff like that. There's certain nations that just are involved with corruption. It's just a little more in them. Like I work with Armenian guy, and it's like every single time someone's trying to sell a car part or something online, he's like, I'll work him. And I'll go, well, he says he wants $1,100. Yeah, I'll get him. And I go, but it says $1,100. I go, no, I'll do it.
Just wait.
And I'm like, I don't have an ounce of that in me. Like, it is what it is. Like, that's what the price is. That's what the tag says. That's what you pay. If you don't want it, then don't pay it or whatever. What is in those nations? Like, where does that come from?
I mean, can you figure that one out? The bartering, the haggling culture that you have in some of these places, also the poverty and the hunger that some of these places have. Definitely altruism is not something that I grew up with. It's a weird kind of thing.
To paint how you grew up versus, let's say, the United States. Because, people always say, people are tough or people are bad. But you see somebody in the United States and a car's broken down on the side of the freeway, like someone will pull over and help them change their tire or just get involved in some way, make a phone call or whatever. People are generally... Look, I walk my dog around my neighborhood, and during the summer months, I got a 110-pound black lab. I've had more than one woman pull aside and ask if my dog needed water. Now, I don't know if that happened to TJ.
No, I don't think so. One of the things that blows my mind from the U.S., and I've been up here for 3 years, is the fact that somebody can walk up to your front door and knock in most of these places. Most people's houses, normal middle class house.
Right.
Most of the houses in TJ have a wall, barbed wire, and razor wire that the Camp Pendleton gave us,
Right.
That's usually, there's layers of security and there's no trust. Why? Because people are just looking, people are never against you. They're for themselves down there. That's the main thing,
Right.
People are just for themselves. Why? They don't trust the government. Mm-hmm. Some of them, trust the criminals more. Some of the criminals actually police some of these places, more so, or they're trusted more than the police there. So,
right.
Culturally, we have a culture of, glorifying in some places more so than others. We have this culture of glorifying the bandit more than the cop, right?
Right.
So you have these like saints, the criminal saints like El Malverde. It's funny, you could see like statues of Malverde up here in LA. It's basically this.
You saying statues or murals?
Murals and statues. Every now and then you find these shrines up here. Like I do classes for law enforcement up here, and every now and then they find something weird, like send me a picture of it.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, hey, Ed, what does this mean? Well, it means that guy kills for a living, and you should probably look for buried guns in his backyard, that type of stuff.
Tell me about this
Malverde. Dude looks like he a small mustache, cowboy shirt. I don't know why they depict him like that. He lived way before cowboy shirts were a thing, but. Mm-hmm. That's a stereotypical thing. He was a peasant, basically. Turn of the century, Sinaloa region. His parents work on a farm.
What year, approximately?
I'd say 1910, 1920s era. He was a bandit. He would steal from the rich and spend his money in the poor communities. So, and supposedly, they offered a big reward for him. So he said to one of his friends to turn him in, claim the reward, and spread it amongst the poor people. Mm. When he was captured, the government hung him from a tree and forbid anybody from burying his body. Mm-hmm. So how they got around it was each of the townspeople, when his body finally fell from the tree, they put rocks on it and they made this mound. And they started praying to him, and he started, granting miracles. Cut forward, maybe, I don't know, 1980s, late 70s. All of the narcos that come from that region, which is most of the high level cartel guys come from that region, built this chapel to him, and you can go into that chapel in Culiacan, and there's pictures of all their. Hey, thank you, Malverde, for helping me cross. And you see this, Denali somewhere up here in the U.S. and the guy with the gold AK,
Wow.
So thanking him. So, and that is what people. That's who they root for most of these communities.
Right.
And I had this surreal moment when I was driving down this highway. Yeah, that's one of the shrines.
One of the shrines, right?
You can see a lot of the pictures of thankful patrons and some of the dollars and stuff like that on the walls.
Yeah.
If you go there and be disrespectful in any kind of way, shape, or form, you're not walking out.
You're getting shot.
Yeah, you're not walking out of there.
So there's a priority that's kind of screwed up, and it happens like sort of. They look up to the gangsters. It's like when you go to we have a little of that like in the black community. It's like favorite movie Scarface. It's like that guy, and it's like that guy's a bad guy. But no, it's my favorite movie. It's like no, that guy's not the real life version of that guy's a bad guy, or that guy's a bad guy. But that's problematic. But
you're getting a little bit more of it right now, and people don't realize it. People are growing up watching Narcos Mexico. Mm-hmm. On Netflix, or the Chapo series,
right?
And unconsciously they're rooting for the bad guys.
Yes,
and the I'm not saying that the government isn't also a villain in the story down there. It definitely is, but in a way, we're getting some of that some of that culture up here as well now.
The story of El Chapo's son.
Yeah.
Craig. Oh, no, I don't know. It's very funny if his name is Craig Chapo. What's his name? Chris will look it up. So El Chapo's...
He has my mind's slipping right now.
It's all right. We'll find it on the internet. So right. El Chapo's son, what is that story?
So basically, the new formed Mexican government has basically renamed and reorganized their whole policing groups. So, which led into having some very new and green guys trying to do very high level counter cartel activities out there. Mm-hmm. So, this certain federal police group is out there looking for suspicious activity in Sinaloa, and all of a sudden they found this weird party in a house somewhere in Sinaloa. They go in there, and surprise, is one of El Chapo's sons in there. And there's actually video of the head cam video of when they grab him, and quickly realize that the cops that are trying to grab him realize that he is who he is, and they stop pointing guns at him. There's Ovidio, yeah, Ovidio.
So it's not Craig. Oh, that must be the younger.
It's one of the other ones.
Ovidio, that's better. Yeah.
So they realize who he is, and you can see in the head cam video, which is out there somewhere. He takes out his gun and hands it over to one of his bodyguards as he's walking out to get arrested, which is, that's how you get shot up here.
He takes his gun.
He takes his gun out.
Ovidio does?
Yeah, and hands it over to one of his bodyguards as he walks out to get arrested.
Why does he do that?
Because he's very confident and that these cops won't do anything.
Okay, right.
And the cops are clearly shaken.
Right.
That they have this high-level guy now in front of them. They report on this. There he is.
Right.
You can see this is one of his bodyguards telling them to calm down.
Right.
And I could see there him taking it out and handing it to somebody in the back.
Right. His gun.
That's how you get shot in most places.
Right.
But that's not what's happening here. So that happens. They take him to a safe, secure federal place. They report his name. The federal government announces his capture.
To the people.
And his cartel guys basically tell anybody that has a gun that is part of this cartel, surround the city. Mm-hmm. So that's what happened.
They surround the facility or the city?
The city.
The city.
They came in droves.
How many
thousands.
would you estimate? Thousands?
There's no way of counting them all, but they basically locked off the city completely. They surrounded one of the military barracks' family housing areas. Basically, kept some of the military's families hostages. Mm-hmm. There's videos of the army units that were coming in, being surrounded by cartel guys, and kind of like, we're shaking hands and stuff like that. Like we're out of this fight. So they were in the thousands. They took advantage of the whole chaos and broke out, I think, 40 members of their cartel guys from one of the prisons there. They basically took control of everything. Then the federal government says, well, we had to let them go for security reasons.
Mm-hmm. Were there any shots fired?
A lot of them.
Oh, there were
a lot. It was Mogadishu type level stuff. People with 50 cals shooting it, against the cops, and a few of the cops that were part of that were later assassinated
by the cartel, but given up. Were they given up by their own?
That's probably
sense,
true,
right?
Yeah.
Here's an esoteric question, but here goes. I'm not a big gun guy. I respect them, I appreciate them, and I understand them. Mm-hmm. And when people talk about like Second Amendment guys, and they'll go, "Hey, the government wants to confiscate your guns, and so the government can do what they want to do." And then somebody goes, "You really think you're going to be able to fight the U.S. Army, with your guns, whatever?" And I always kind of go, yeah, I mean, how would that work? Like you're fighting a Marine battalion or something, like in your street or whatever. But as I hear stories like this, I don't know. It does sound like a well-armed militia is more powerful than the government.
All you need to do is create enough disruption and enough dependence on local communities to basically make the government the enemy and disrupt their thinking, I guess. The way they beat the army was basically they were outnumbered, and they also took hostage a lot of their family members by surrounding some of the barracks that they were stationed at. That's one way
If there was a, let's say, right-leaning law and order president that took charge of Mexico, would he be dead in a matter of months?
We had one of them with Felipe Calderon, which is 2 presidents back. And the guy he named head of national, security, was just arrested for, being supposedly being paid by the Sinaloa cartel mass amounts of money, and he was in the U.S. And this is a guy that was, had a bunch of commendations by the FBI and the EA and the government as being like you helped us, fight the cartels and stuff like that. Luna was his name. And so we had that, and still they got his top guy.
Is this a fair statement? If you're in a position like he was of power, and there's many different positions, judges and police chiefs and things like that, you either take the money or you take a bullet.
Yeah.
But you don't get left alone.
No.
Right? Like you can't go like here's the thing, and I think here's the insidious part of this. Like I think of myself as a regular guy, and I'd go, I don't want to be involved with the cartel. Like I just want to leave. I don't want your money. I don't want to get shot. I just want to go about my life. But if you said to me, well, that's not, there's A or B, there's no C.
Yeah.
There's either you take our money and you and your family will live in luxury, or you don't take our money and we're going to kill you and your family.
Yeah.
Those are the only 2 options. In which case, I, whom a law-abiding guy, would go, well, I'll take the money rather than the lead, because at least for the family and certainly for myself. Does it come down to that sort of A or B for many people?
Yes, especially positions of power. I mean, the reason I left the job was the government unit that I was in. A lot of the countermeasures they did for us, we got polygraph exams. Some of us that had FBI background checks, and I trusted all of that on myself because all the guys that I worked with did the same thing. All of a sudden, it was declared as they were violating our human rights of privacy and stuff like that. So a lot of the guys that got left out of the job came back years later, and a lot of them came back corrupted, and basically. Now I was working with a bunch of people that I know where they were for a few years, so I had to, hightail it out of there.
What could just an average street cop make from a cartel if he was on the payroll?
I'll let you. I've heard stories. I've heard stories of people, getting paid to let go of a cartel guy in the millions of dollars. This street level municipal cop somewhere stopping somebody and getting paid $1 million.
Because they have tons of cash, right?
I mean, they have so much the rat-eaten cash in some places I've seen. You know, they
rat-eaten.
Yeah, that's just you get these blocks of cash with a hole that a rat ate through them. That type of
really?
stuff. Yes.
Wow.
The most I've seen, like in one place, was I think $11 million in a minivan.
Cash in a minivan.
Yeah, yeah, and surreal moment where one of the guys that I was working with, under his breath, said, "Too many," and I was like, "What would you mean by that?" And it's like, "Oh, there's too many of you to kill to take the cash," and I was like, "That makes me not trust you anymore."
So he said to whom?
He said under his voice when we found it.
Who was he trying to say that? Was he saying it to you?
No, he just said, like, he looked at the whole money and looked around and said, too many.
Oh, he'd have to kill too many people to take the $11 million.
Yeah, basically not enough bullets.
Wow.
So that's the level of, and you look back at it and I felt betrayed, or now I don't trust this guy. But when you kind of think about it, it's $11 million.
Well, how could anyone function if you had no idea who was in and who was out?
For me, it was 12 years of that, and I was very idealistic, very foolish. I was stupid, basically, doing that job for the amount of time I did it.
What's your citizenship?
I'm a permanent resident right now up here.
Which means you're not an American, but you're a permanent resident?
It means I'm a green card holder, basically.
Okay, so if you just had, if I was the president of the United States and he said to me, I said to you, "Hey, Ed, I want to stem some of this drugs and the money and the prostitution, whatever. You just tell me, what do you want? You want to legalize something? You want more troops? You want more drones? You want more surveillance? You want some countermeasures? You want tunnel? You want walls that go into the ground 50 feet? Like, you tell me, what do you want?"
Americans pay for most of the trucks, weapons, uniforms, and the training that most police in Mexico get. And some of these cops are actually working for the cartels.
We pay for it.
Yeah, you pay for that. Plan Medida, it's called. Basically, the U.S. aids in drug enforcement and outsources drug enforcement to Mexico. Mm-hmm. They've been doing it for years, and none of it's working, and they've basically been doing the same thing over and over again. Cartels are over there. Let's get a bunch of armed guys in the truck, and let's patrol the area, and somehow that's going to solve anything. It doesn't solve anything, and, there's a few companies out there making a killing off some of those contracts, and it's not doing anything. So probably audit the money that you're sending down there. That's one thing I would say. Legalize some things, maybe not all of them. There's some pretty horrible stuff that I don't see it would solve anything if you legalized it. And finally, we've had high level political security individuals in government being eventually caught up, found out as cartel plans. So any sort of counter drug enforcement, counter drug or counter organized crime operations down there, I don't see it working with, I don't see it work. I think the government and the cartels are basically two heads on the same snake in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's a hard thing to say. But
what would you do at the border?
There's the border security as it is meant to deter small amounts of drugs crossing the border, but not a large amount of drugs. People talk about tunnel technology that they use in Israel being used on the Mexican side. It hasn't worked, so that's out.
Tunnel technology,
to detect tunnels coming underneath the walls, like they do it against the Palestinians when they make tunnels, and that technology hasn't worked there. I think that it's a different soil. They dig deeper there, so it's a different thing. So that's I'm not being defeatist, but that hasn't worked. Every time there's fog in TJ, it's magic hour.
Oh, really?
It defeats a lot of the countermeasures that U.S. has to detain or deter things from crossing. So unless you come up with a machine that kills fog, that's pretty hard to do. I don't know. It has to be multi-tiered. First off, the U.S. has to realize it's not a Mexico problem. It's a U.S.-Mexico problem. It's a regional problem. a lot of these cartel guys live in the U.S. as well, right? So some of these guys are living up here. We see the people that are growing weed illegally in some public lands in the U.S. They're not sending their cash down back to Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
It means that you have a thriving, growing cartel organization presence growing up here as well. So it's not they don't care about the border.
Is the problem getting worse?
It is. We last year was our bloodiest year when it came to murders and reported murders because
in Mexico.
In Mexico.
How many? Do you remember what the number was?
I don't remember the number, but it was the bloodiest year in recorded history, and those are the numbers that are reported. Because a lot of people just disappear, nobody reports them.
Is this cartel on cartel crime mostly?
That's another thing. So the numbers are skewed. There's been a lot of cases where Army checkpoint sees a car and they kind of speed off and they shoot it, or government forces do it, and then it turns out just a bunch of drunk teenagers. Toss in a few AKs in there, and they're cartel guys. So there's been a lot of that as well.
So a lot of misreporting, a lot of skewed numbers. Every government that goes out, you start finding out that a lot of the numbers were wrong. Any government comes in, blames it on the past one. So now they're cleaning up things, and it turns out they're just as dirty as the other one. And again, we come from that. Mexico has a history of making people disappear. We had a bunch of students that were picked up by state police officers somewhere in Mexico, down in central Mexico, that disappeared, and nobody's been able to find them. Numbered in the 40s. We had a pozolero, which is stew maker, that was based out of Tijuana. Stew maker?
Stew maker. Based out of Tijuana, probably about 8 years back. Actually was part of the whole thing when they found this guy. We were looking around vacant lots and stuff like that around TJ. He would make caustic soda and make bodies disappear at an industrial level. That was his whole gig.
Worst menudo ever. So he was like dissolving people.
Yeah. He said he'd never killed anybody. But he's and this is according to his account. He would get bodies delivered to him on a daily basis almost, and he would just have this caustic soda farm running. So he would melt people down, put them into a sand grater to get all the solid parts out, and just dump the goo and holes around his different properties that he would go and do his work and dump things out.
God, it's ghoulish. Is what it is.
Well, so ISIS videos, the whole high production ISIS videos that started showing up on Facebook when that whole thing started. All of those were inspired by narco blog cartel videos 5-6 years back, before the ISIS videos came up. So Mexico's been exporting, maybe not terrorism, but ways of terrifying people for a while.
Is there a general lack of respect for life in that region? Because you hear about certain cultures and it's like, well, this guy insulted my dog, so I killed him. It's like, or the people get insulted, so I killed them, or this person stole my lawn umbrella and something, so I killed them. It's a weird thing. It's like, you can talk about policing all you want, but at a certain level, it's a kind of sanctity for life. I believe here in the Judeo-Christian and Western cultures, we just go, you can't kill somebody over nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always the maniac is what I'm saying. But in general, is there something there?
Yeah. I mean, well, we come from a culture that used to drag people to pyramids and rip their hearts out and then throw the body down. The warrior culture in Mexico was rewarded not by how many people you killed, but how many people you captured to then sacrifice in the pyramid. There has to be some sort of weird connection to how, most of the gory videos that go on online right now that come out of the cartel scene. That's the high production value are now that's what comes out of that region, and it's always basically it's a diss battle between the cartels. Oh, you cut up their heads? We're going to do it with a chainsaw. And now, we're going to tie dynamite to this guy. And now we're going to do this. I had the surreal experience of, in Tijuana, there was a we got a report of a body in the middle of a soccer field in the middle of downtown Tijuana. So I walked over to it, and it's a wheelbarrow with a guy in parts inside of the wheelbarrow, kind of neatly laid out. The security guard that was there then walked over to me and was like, looked at it and was like, and he said in his mind, he said, not the worst thing I've seen, but it's pretty bad. And I was like
not the worst thing.
Where are you from? I'm from Sinaloa. See worse things there. And this was at the start of at the start of some of the violence in Tijuana. So it wasn't as normal there, but basically the normal is different in Mexico. In parts of Mexico, the normal is different, right? So my Tijuana normal is it's not the same normal as you guys have up here. And this weird normalcy that kind of sets into the culture down there. 7 people died last night across the city. Well, that's how many, let's see how many die tomorrow. That's.
Yeah. Well, people have this ability to try to normalize and get to some sort of homeostasis or whatever all the time. I mean, when I think back on a lot of the rooms I used to sleep in, like they're super hot and uncomfortable and shitty, and I just lay there on top of the whatever, and I was normalizing it. I'd go there every night and sleep in this horrible box, that was hotter than shit, and I couldn't take that for 10 minutes now. Yeah. Like I got central air, brother. Like I'm not doing. I got a thread count, a down comforter, and a MyPillow, and I'm not fucking even going close to there. But I could handle it back then because that was what it was. Yeah. And when you're putting up barbed wire in front of your house and busting up glass and putting it on top of a cinder block wall so people can't come over the top, that just is. Yeah. You become, you sort of just, I don't know. It's like if you were shipwrecked and you're on an island, next thing you know, you'd just be eating sand crabs that are alive, and it's stuff you would never dream of doing. But after 6 months, that'd just be your life, and whole nations kind of become that, right?
Yeah. Well, I was taken out from that, and came up here, and now I do training and classes across the country. So I'm in a different part of the country every weekend. Like I was in Chattanooga, which is beautiful, by the way. That's like a weird white Wakanda, It's like a hidden place. They're like, don't tell anybody it's here. Everybody moved to Chattanooga. It's great. They don't want me to say that, but it's great. And then you go to Tennessee, and it's weird, Then you go to come to California, and things are weird here. But I get that whole forgetting a little bit about where you come from, that hardship. I remember complaining at a hotel about the heating. Hey, the heating doesn't work, and I was like, I stayed in holes on the ground. I slept in holes on the ground when I was working down there. I was like, complaining about the heat here, right?
Yeah, well, the whatever is. So we have a whole bunch of women going on marches wearing pink hats because they're being oppressed by I don't know whom exactly. They never really make it clear. And then where you are, they're finding body parts in a wheelbarrow at the soccer field.
Women are marching down there because women are disappearing and being found murdered. And
right.
So, and there's this weird thing that happens in Mexico where so you get places where there's a lot of cartel activity and sociopaths, and we have serial killers down there as well.
Interesting.
And they basically use the backdrop of a city that has 7, 8, 10 murders a night. And Tijuana right now is going through this crisis where pretty young women, are being abducted and found dead, sexually assaulted. And you see this and you're like, well, this is cartel related? What's going on here? Of course not. It's people taking advantage of the fact that this is normal. Nobody wants to be altruistic. They want to have this backdrop of this violent place, and they can get away with stuff. That's what happened in Juarez, in the killing fields in Juarez. Juarez had hundreds and hundreds of women just raped and killed in the desert.
Right.
The backdrop was this cartel war happening down there. And nobody was held responsible. Nobody was found. Mexico City, a 7-year-old kid was the school closed. They left a kid outside, and a lady came over, grabbed this kid, took her somewhere. She was killed, found later on, dumped in a place nearby. and nobody did anything. Nobody did anything. The authorities were slow to respond. It's a cultural numbness kind of
right. And so our women march because they get 7 weeks maternity leave, but their husband only gets 4 weeks paternity leave, and he should get 7 too. Because they're out of problems. They don't have where you come from, there's real problems.
Yeah.
And we don't have real problems. We probably march in much greater numbers than your women march.
Yes.
So our women, our fat, middle-aged, white, pink hatters march in much greater numbers than yours being raped and slaughtered in the desert.
Yeah.
Interesting phenomenon, isn't it?
Yeah.
If there was a cause worth marching for, you'd think there'd be more on your side of the cause than our side of the cause. But it just goes to show you we have to make up problems over here.
I mean, being political down there is dangerous.
Really?
So that's one reason why some of those marches are really small, is because being political or outspoken about anything is dangerous. Right?
If it's getting worse, what is your prognostication? And then when does it hit some sort of tipping point? And then when does it involve us, or the military? Like what is it? When does it get to that point of no return, or that sort of saturation point where it's like, I don't know, it's World War III now, or some version of that?
Well, I think there's interesting things that are coming to light right now. One of them, resources. Mexico is a resource-rich neighbor.
Right.
Specifically, lithium.
Lithium for batteries.
We have, I think, 70-some% of the mineable lithium on the planet is in Sonora. Curiously enough, near where the Mormons were massacred. So that's going to be a factor. There was a Canadian mining operation that won the rights to mine that place that was bought out by the Chinese.
Right.
And that didn't last long after this massacre happened. Some things happened. Some sort of negotiation happened between Mexico and the U.S. So I think that's going to be a factor, more so in the future. Resources,
yeah,
that's going to be a factor. If government goes completely down there, there's no amount of military barbed wire. You can line up all the soldiers, all the Marines in Pendleton on that border. There's no amount of people that will stop the flow of just displaced individuals from down there trying to come up here.
What do you? I'm going to tease this. Got to do a spot, but all the migrant march and the caravan and all this stuff. What we do over here is we talk about the caravan for 10 nights in a row, and then we move on to the coronavirus, and then we move on to the Russia Gate, and then we move on to collusion with Russia, and then we move on the Mueller report, and then we just keep moving on. We kind of bored with something, and it's like kids are being thrown in cages and they're being torn out of their mother's arms, and then we're on to the next thing immediately. Yeah. The people who cared about the kids in cages don't care about kids in cages anymore. Now they're on the coronavirus. We're easily distracted by our own headlines over here. And again, this is all just a vestige of no real problems. We don't have real problems over here. So we just get caught up in fake manufactured problems, and everything's a mother's nightmare, and it's a movie of the week, and that's how we roll. But I'm going to tease my question to you. And what was my question I was teasing you? Sorry, did I ask it already? Had a long day. Let's say, what would the president of Mexico, who would he like? Would he like to see Trump get a second term? Would he like to see Liz Warren get in there? Would he have liked to see Hillary in there? Like, who does Mexico want running our country? And then California is kind of reverting into Mexico. I don't know if you drive through certain. I'll tell you one of the signs, and it's not like a census thing. Like, there's X amount of Hispanics living in wherever. When I would go to Tijuana and other parts of Mexico first thing I would notice is just street vendors. Just people out on the street selling food and shit and corn and whatever. Okay, I grew up in L.A. There was no such thing as a street vendor. You had to have a license, drive a truck, whatever, have a restaurant, get a health grade, whatever it is. I just drove to the Forum last weekend, man, and I just drove through England. It was tents and generators and lights and, I mean, street vendor. So just as a one little indicator of a greater Hispanic population, just the notion of driving down the street 15 years ago and seeing no street vending, now driving down the street everywhere and seeing tons of people out in the street, mostly Hispanic, I'm guessing, doing the street vending, that feels to me like a very clear, there's a much greater Mexican population here than there was 20 years ago. Yeah. I'll let you ruminate on that in a second. First, let me just hit ZipRecruiter. Hiring. Well, it used to be hard. Multiple job sites, stacks of resumes, confusing review process. Today's hiring is easy. Just go to one place, ZipRecruiter.com/Adam. Visit ZipRecruiter. It sends your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards. Plus, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and invites them to apply to your job. As applications come rolling in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one, spotlights top candidates so you never miss a great match. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day, everybody. So let's not mess around. Let's go with ZipRecruiter and get yourself the best employee ever. Right, Dawson?
Right now, our listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/Adam. That's ZipRecruiter.com/ADAM, ZipRecruiter.com/Adam. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
So, thoughts. Los Angeles is sort of turning into Mexico. That's
Mexico. Like the inside joke for most people from Mexico, and I'm from there, like, that's ours, You look at California, it's like 50, and 2050 rolls around, se habla español. That's also, you go into any shopping, you go shopping and you see religious candles.
That's another.
It's
tell. Yeah, the religious, the Virgin Guadalupe candle, and the selling of the dogs wrapped in bacon on the side of the street and the corn, and also the fresh fruit carts.
Do they put mayonnaise on the bun of the hot dogs?
I have never eaten a street dog before, but yes,
if they do, that's a sign that we're almost ready to put the Mexican flag on top of the
California's and the folks that govern California just go, whatever, I'll take whoever votes, we'll do it.
Yeah, and
you hear candidates speaking Spanish now when they're on the campaign trail.
Or this guy Cory Booker.
Cory Booker,
that was bad Spanish. I mean, if you shouldn't even try if that's your Spanish. That was like those people down there were like, ¿qué?
Yeah.
It's interesting seeing that. I had this surreal moment. One of my friends who's in the military took me to took me to kind of share some of the stuff that I know with some of their people.
Who's there? Are the military people?
Yeah.
Who's military? Our military?
Your military.
Mm-hmm.
And, you guys are accustomed to dealing with Islamic terrorism, but not accustomed to dealing with, kids with smartphones taking pictures or videotaping you from a second story and getting your cell phone passcodes and, counting the numbers of guns on your cars and how many bullets you have and all common cartel tactics. So I went there to scare him about that, right? Mm-hmm. And the guy that was with me was a Muslim American. And he tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Ed, this is Ed. He's from Mexico. The current villains. These guys. You're the bad guys currently."
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, no longer. We're done with.
But I think now we're going into the realm of now apparently because power to vote or something. I don't know.
So who would Mexico or the current administration like to see?
Current administration is run by a populist socialist.
Mm-hmm.
Who is openly pro-Venezuela. Maduro recently deposed President Evo Morales, who was also populist leftist in Mexico after he was basically ousted from government down there. Obviously, a populist socialist would kind of fit into who he would want probably to work with.
Like Bernie Sanders.
Probably a Bernie Sanders.
How's Mexico do its border with Guatemala?
It's basically a fence and a river, and it's not pretty. So what happened is Mexico made this giant. Mexico's president AMLO, Andres Manuel López Obrador, he's a character. He's not all there. Mm-hmm. That's just my opinion. He made this new police force called the National Guardia Nacional, or the National Guard, which is basically they just changed uniforms and just a new patch on the shoulder. And he said he was going to make that to fight the cartels. Well, the whole migrant caravan happens, and tariffs were the U.S. used tariffs as a pressure element for Mexico. So let's take all this new forces and basically put them on the border. So basically, the U.S. outsourced the border patrol. Mm-hmm. There's people down there jokingly call the National Guard the Region 4 Border Patrol. But Region 4 is like the Mexico's DVD region. So they got pressure by America to enforce their borders, so the folks from Honduras and wherever couldn't come across. Yeah, after that, after the last migrant caravan made a mess of Tijuana and to try to get across. Well, what is that migrant caravan about? I mean, who Mexico could have interrupted it and stopped it at the border initially coming into Mexico? Well, they basically, Mexico didn't have a lot of border security, and these guys just basically plowed through the border. And they actually injured and hit a lot of the Mexican border agents in that place when they came in violently. They did. Yeah. And as they went through Mexico, basically each state said, "You're welcome. Have some food, but leave," Right. And so they were like very optimistic and hopeful as they were making their way to Mexico until they ended up in Tijuana. Making their way through Mexico. Through Mexico. Right. Until they made it to Tijuana. Tijuana people are, I'm Tijuanan, so we don't take shit. Oh. So they got there and they were met with protest and cartel it was cartel. Abducted a few of them, which a lot of the people in that caravan were 18 street gang members. They were wearing sweaters and stuff like that to cover their tattoos. Not all of them. Some of them, were people but actually. But it wasn't like a bunch of moms and their daughters looking for asylum. Not all of them. Not all of them. And I get a lot of flack for talking about them in a negative fashion. But I'm from Tijuana. You can talk to a lot of people from Tijuana. They'll tell you the same thing. The first camp they had in Tijuana, there was next to a school. They had to close the school down from finding a lot of drug needles and having the migrants harass the students. Right. They made a bunch of disruptive pushes to the border, which basically closed down crossing the border for locals, which that's how you kill the economy in Tijuana, is if you interrupt that border crossing. And you got a lot of people calling people from Tijuana racist because, well, first off, most people are brown there, but it was pretty weird seeing the whole racist term kind of tossed around. We absorbed 3,000 Haitian migrants only 2 years earlier with no problems because Tijuana. Yeah, because they claimed asylum. The U.S. said no, and they were like, "Well, let's stay and work," right? This caravan was like, "No, let's start shit. Let's draw in attention," which they did. There was a lot of press down there. A lot of aid workers, volunteer aid workers, doing puppet shows and sending all these, food down there. You would see the food come into these encampments, and then it was later on being sold in the swap meet in the back. Really? So was there anyone bankrolling this? Well, I mean, don't take my word for it. There's a bunch of reports on this all out there. I actually knew some of the federal police guys that were basically shadowing or following this caravan as it made its way. They were being paid in envelopes with dollars. By who? I have no idea. But they were being paid in dollars as they were making their way through. The reason I know this is because they would get the dollars and they would go to exchange places, because dollars aren't accepted as currency in central Mexico, so they would have to exchange those dollars into pesos. So some money from the U.S. was supporting this. Definitely money from the U.S. was supporting that caravan push, yes. You talked about if you legalized everything, I mean, the cartels are really just a sort of business that'll morph into any shape that they can use to make money, right? Yeah, they diversified long ago. Right. And so the cartels, we call them the drug cartels, and we go, it's a narco state, but they're getting into everything, right? Yeah. And the more they get into everything, the less
power you have to just cut off the supply of fentanyl and we'll starve them or something like that, but they go somewhere else.
Yeah.
How does human trafficking work in 2020?
Well, I mean, so all these cartels have a vested interest in controlling some of these border crossing corridors into the U.S. So basically, you can't do anything illegal in some of these border towns. Let's take Tijuana, for example. You can't do anything as far as trafficking people through there without the cartels knowing, right? There's just no way. I'm going to be an independent coyote, and I'm going to, cross somebody across the border. There's just no way. So you have to align yourself with one of these criminal groups that work or have possession of a border area, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say you want to cross the border, and there's two ways they play it, because I've actually talked to some people that do it, right, professionally. I did an interview for a magazine, and one of these guys was like openly. I talked about, hey, what do you think about the border policy right now that Trump is kind of pushing? And he's like, wow, it's great for business. It makes it seem like it's harder when it's not that hard, Like they could charge more? Yeah. So he said, like, well, I mean, think about it. You're a Mexican? Yeah. Okay. You want to be on the U.S. side? Yeah. Okay. So get a Mexican passport. Not hard to do if you're a Mexican. And we'll fly you to Canada. You can walk down.
Like literally just walk across the border.
Yeah. There's that, and that happens a lot, Or you can get a travel visa if you're middle class-ish and just overstay your visa, right? Or they can wait for a very foggy night and breach that border wall, the new one. It's been breached a few times.
Really?
Yeah. They just wait for fog. And
how do they breach it?
Torches, blow torches.
Really?
Blow torches, or they come up with rope ladders, ladders. There's a lot of weird ways they've been penetrating. They don't use those tunnels. Those tunnels are worth way too much to risk it on people crossing through there.
That's a very interesting point, which is the people don't earn enough, and you don't want to jeopardize a tunnel being found. So the tunnel's for drugs.
Yeah,
I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Or beyond. Who
yeah.
knows?
I mean, imagine how much drugs you could put through a tunnel. That tunnel that was found was maybe 20 years old, maybe 15 or something. Imagine every day how much drugs you could pump through it and how much money it's going to make you.
It's like it can't be cheap to dig a tunnel, but the return on investment.
Yeah, the first low is going to pay for it. Let's say that tunnel was worth maybe $3 million, maybe that I can imagine it'd be
right.
Just monetarily wise. So they're not going to risk it on that. And crossing people, it depends on how you want to cross, where you want to cross. There's a common misconception that where the border wall is more built up, that it's harder to cross, which actually the methodologies to cross those segments of the border are more well thought out, and there's like a whole system to it.
Is there a higher batting average where the wall is more
in some places,
robust?
Basically, in some places they have it down to a science. So they have these ways, basically depending on the weather,
Well, the fog rolls in, all the electronic surveillance and stuff is sort of out the window, or
and I'm not saying anything that the Border Patrol doesn't already know. There's a long stretch of wall. They have a finite amount of resources to respond to any suspected border breach, and all you have to do is just come up with a bunch of reasons for them to respond along that border, and basically just use one of them to cross people, right? So it's
explain that a little more. So
there's a border.
The border walls, X amount of long.
They make events across that border for the responding agents to go there.
Right, like start cutting through something or busting up something.
They have a single place where they cross most of the people.
Right. So
they can play the system basically.
Right. They can't plug all those holes with the amount of people they have.
No.
What is the announcement of like sanctuary states?
Yeah.
Like California and cities or sanctuary cities and states. We keep making these, our officials proudly boast that we're sanctuary cities, and our mayor Garcetti goes on with the police chief, and he's explaining that LAPD is not going to round up anyone and not going to assist with ICE, and here are things to do. If a federal agent, an ICE agent, knocks on your door, you don't have to give them any information stuff. Is there? What is that message being sent?
I get the and again, I'm an immigrant. You know, not an illegal one, but I'm an immigrant, and I have you know, I've experienced that through other people. You know, one thing that comes with being announced, basically, it's like, come here, right? And when these people come here, you know, and it's a sanctuary city, the people traffickers also come here because they set up these. So you can't have a trafficking organization of people without having an origin point and a delivery point. Some of these people can't pay for their delivery, so they have to be held somewhere until their family pays for their beer, right?
Right.
And that's when things get kind of dicey and kind of dark. You know, Arizona is the kidnapping capital of the U.S., and the reason why it's that is because a lot of people show up in Arizona from crossing the border, and then they get, you know, people get grabbed. People don't get, usually migrant society communities don't report things.
Right.
If they're targeted for something, you know, so it's not uncommon for in some of these migrant communities, in some of these sanctuary states and cities, for people to be abducted and put into sex trafficking, or people being abducted and held for ransom for months on end in some room somewhere.
You've got to pay your debt. How much is the average cost? Approximately,
depending on who you are and where you want to go, you know, it could be 8,000, 5,000 maybe for somebody.
So, does the sanctuary city invite this? I mean, the announcement of we are a sanctuary city.
It invites. I'll say this: it invites people to come here looking for a better life for themselves and their families. It also invites people that want to make money off people wanting to come here to make a better life for themselves and their families. So it invites both.
To your security side, couple of tips for folks who don't feel like being abducted, let's say. I have found, but you tell me, I'm not a security expert, but I do kind of find that if you look at security or criminals or whatever, and you're just sort of logical about it, that you can distill these things down to some pretty easy remedies. When I lived in a horrible part of Hollywood and I had a pickup truck and the only thing I had that was worth anything to my name was a Sony digital stereo in my pickup truck, and it was the 80s, and I knew we wouldn't make it one night on the street, I spray painted it brown.
Yeah.
And I was like, I defiled it. Like, I literally put a piece of tape over the digital read, and I just spray painted it brown. I was like, good luck, junkies. Take this. You'll never be able to sell it. You could never clean all this spray paint off the face of this thing. It's worth nothing. I thought that stealing a stereo is a very desperate thing. Busting a window, reaching in, tearing it out. That's quick junkie move. That's not organized master criminal move. That's junkie move, and you got to sell it. You got to sell it tonight, and you can't sell it if it's painted brown. And I spray painted that bad boy brown. And I put a fuel cutoff switch on my fuel pump in the back. I didn't have insurance.
Yeah.
I didn't have any alarm. I didn't have insurance. I knew my truck was going to get stolen. I spray painted stereo brown. The truck was stolen 3 times. Each time I found it on foot. It was 2 blocks away. I just had to figure out. No. There was enough in the float bowl of the carburetor to start the car, go 100 feet, and then it would buck and then run out of gas because the fuel pump was cut off. I just had to figure out what direction the car was facing.
Yeah.
And I'd walk that direction. I'd go find it. Stereo was always in it because it was brown.
Yeah.
So these are basic little things. How does that apply to safety, abduction, and things of that nature?
I mean, abduction is not that common up here in the U.S. as far as, you know, for ransom. But people being targeted for a lot of things is.
Right.
Number one, know that people have social media now. The number one thing I always tell people is sterilize your social media if you can. A lot of criminals that are my age and a lot of people that come up from the places that I come up from have weaponized social media for a good amount of time, and they know how to do it, right? So, you know, things like, hey, we're on vacation here in, you know,
right,
and that's a good time to break into your house.
You see all these athletes showing off all their jewelry and then going on a road trip for 2 weeks.
Look at my gun collection. You know, here's a picture of my gun collection and the safe. Right. So, all I need is a picture of your safe, and all I need is a Google, sometime on Google, and I can find a way to crack it. I can find a way to circumvent the functionality of that safe, or go on social media and find out the name of your dog. There's software out there that can come up with passcodes to most things. It tries several codes, billions of code combinations in a span of a few minutes. So there's all these things are possible. Social media is a window into our lives sometimes that some people just take for granted, and a lot of stuff is out there of us. You could be the biggest ninja on the planet, and I've talked to some people that are legit ninjas, ghosts, right? No social media accounts, nothing. But their family isn't, or their daughter isn't, or the daughter takes a picture of them with the house in the back and the car, you know?
Right.
So, really, people should really kind of consider or think about what they're casting out as far as their personal lives, information, digitally, because that is one of the main ways I've seen current criminal activity kind of take root and how they select people.
Well, it's very interesting, although they just had that rapper, I don't know, gun smoke, bong smoke, two smoke, pot smoke, whatever his name was, but he just got himself shot. And I don't know if I don't know if there was a robbery or not, but there's pictures of him and his buddies holding piles of cash to make your point. Yeah. There's pictures of him and his buddies holding stacks of cash by their head. Yeah. Then he's sending out pictures of his gift box that he got with the address of the house on there. So it's like everybody who's got a smartphone knows the address of this guy's house and that there's a pile of cash somewhere. Now, he got shot. Pop Smoke, he got shot maybe just because. I don't know who executed that guy and if they still figured out what it is, but his address and at least 20 grand in cash was just literally just put it out to the universe and said, rang that dinner bell.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes that could be a thing for females. The resource that people are after might be the females themselves, if they're targeted by some deviant out there, which is also something I see sometimes when I get some females coming through some of the classes I do. I tell them, if you're targeted, you're going to be targeted not for what's in your bank account, but because of you. You're the resource they're looking for, right? So, basically doing an honest assessment about what we put out there. I'm not here to tell you how to sterilize yourself online. There's a bunch of resources out there that you can go into, but there's, just be honest about what you put out there and realize that you could be the hardest target on the planet, because I've talked to some of the most, government ninja guys, but their family is that's a weak link in their security ring. That's one thing I always ask people to kind of consider and think about, What
is, back to Mexico, very good point, the social media, all your info being out there. For those who are thinking about taking a vacation, and I used to go through Tijuana, party in Tijuana, sleep on the beach outside of Tijuana on the sand alone. I mean, just drunk, just laying out, waking up with dogs walking sideways around me. Then me and my buddies who did construction pile into trucks, keep going through Rosarita, hit the beach, buy tequila and fireworks at the roadside stands and just go sit in the beach and just light off fireworks and surf and stuff. Yeah. Are those days over?
No, they're still there. Baja is still, I like to call Baja dangerous freedom. There's a little bit of danger there, but it's still, go past Tijuana. Most of the dangerous, violent parts of Tijuana are on the east side. Mm-hmm. Most of the, Rosarito, Ensenada, things happen, but it's safe.
You go down there and party and sleep on the beach?
Yeah. Well, maybe.
I slept on the beach in Tijuana. That's a different time.
That's a different time. I wouldn't do that, though.
I didn't even have a sleeping bag. I just had a blanket.
That's pretty insane.
I slept on the side of the road on the way into Tijuana when we blew a car tire out and couldn't get it fixed the next day. So I was used to sleeping on the ground. But are the resorts safe? You hear about stuff every once in a while.
So, one thing I'll say about the resorts, most of these places are safe. There's organized crime activity around resorts sometimes because some of these places basically have investments from people that have money, and they may or may not be cartel guys. You know, not all of them, but some of them do.
Some of the resorts.
Some of them are, pay for protection or pay for stuff not to happen in those environments.
Sure.
So some of these places, and there's been a few cases of some of these places that then get targeted specifically because they pay for protection to one group, and then another comes in and is like, this is what your money, earned you. So they will shoot up the place and stuff like that. It's not common, but it does happen.
Is it bad for business, for the cartels to have the resorts?
Yeah.
Just like killing Mormons is bad for business, like too much attention.
Exactly.
They don't want a bunch of...
But it's not a single cartel in Mexico, it's several, so it's a way for them to fuck with each other's business.
Right.
That's one thing I'll tell you. Another thing is that a lot of you hear stories of people being drugged in bars and stuff like that down there. And I worked on more than a few of those cases where Americans were drugged and things happen, and you go there and look at the videos and talk to the owners and interrogate all the guys that were serving drinks and stuff like that. And then later on, you find out that the other Americans were basically targeting Americans down there, because if you want to get away with a crime, just go down to Mexico and do it, right? And then come back the next day,
right?
So I'd say if you're an American and you go down there to party, be very weary of the locals, but be very, very weary of just weird Americans that you meet down there. You might feel safe around them, but just don't have any drinks that aren't open in front of you. And if you do open the drink, probably keep it covered with your hand. That's a way that people
don't get up
slipped.
and go to the bathroom.
Yeah, don't leave that ring alone.
Yeah, I always bring my drinks to the bathroom, not because I'm worried about being rude, but just I'm worried about not having my drink for 10 seconds. I got to drink while I piss. Dawson drinks in the shower. You don't have to worry about roofing.
Shower beer?
He does the shower beer.
That's a time saver.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting point, which is...
That's why I do it. Just to save a little bit of time.
It's that efficient. Here, it's a very interesting point, and it's sort of like whenever you talk to guys who have a field of expertise, you talk about security, and you think they're going to talk about putting bars on your windows, but they're talking about social media, and you think, how safe are these Mexican places? And you think, oh, that's right. It's all the fucking horrible gringos who wouldn't dare try that shit in Orange County, but they think this is a lawless environment, and they're drunk, and they're going to go for it there.
Simple detail that I'll share with a lot of people out there. I did a lot of arrests in Mexico of American fugitives being down there. What do you think is one of most of these people, what crime were they wanted for in the U.S.?
Oh, what crime were they wanted for in the U.S.?
Most of the people that are arrested down there are Americans.
I'll just say rape since we're on that subject.
Most of them were sexual, some sort of sexual assault.
Right.
Rape.
Which, by the way, you don't leave at the border. You just find a more hospitable environment and apply your trade, right?
That's exactly it. And some of these people would congregate in places like Rosarito. Like Cabo,
tourists,
Cabo. Like we had a lot of people in Cabo that we found out later on. They had like a bunch of warrants out for their arrest in the U.S. So it's a thing. People don't think about it, but it's true.
So last couple questions. The wall, good idea, bad idea, not going to make a difference.
Having actually seen the wall on both sides, having actually catched some of the coyotes working on that side and seeing how they work, having worked with some of the Customs and Border Protection guys and some of the Border Patrol guys in the U.S., first off, they get vilified a lot, the Border Patrol guys. They do a lot of work. There's very few of them doing a job that there should be more of them, probably. Right. Things like those cages that you talked about. I actually saw one of those facilities. Some of these Border Patrol agents were paying out of pocket for toothbrushes for the kids that were in there.
Right.
Like out of pocket.
Yeah. What do those facilities look like?
I mean, they're holding spaces for people.
Right. I don't really call them cages.
Well, okay. So if you detain somebody, you need walls.
Yeah.
That's a detainment space. And also, if people want to complain about those cages, I'll gladly take them down in Mexico and see some of the holding sites we have for migrants down there. They make a comparison, right? And I don't see anybody
rather stay on the U.S.
And
side.
I don't see anybody protesting. Oh, Mexican cages! Like, oh my, you don't see.
It's the
that.
same nutty broads that are out of problems at the fucking march with the fucking pink hats. It's the same baddie broads. Let's be honest.
So again, I've seen some like heart wrenching things happen at the border. People talk about family separation. I've seen some of these guys rescue people from certain death out in the
Patrol.
desert. Border Patrol guys, and some people in the Border Patrol out of pocket, like, I'm going to buy these toothbrushes. Why? There's no, they don't have toothbrushes.
Right.
For these, and you're like, why are you doing that? I'd feel bad.
Right.
They're humans. Right?
No, I agree. They're good guys and women, and I don't know why I have to villainize everyone. They're doing a fucking job. Well, what do you want?
I'd say this. Wall, okay. More Border Patrol agents and more money for manpower.
More agents.
More agents, more and technology, if you can. They're doing a very possible job, really, realistically. The wall is stemming illegal immigration into the U.S. It is. There's no doubt about it. A lot of the people that are staying illegally in the U.S. are usually people that overstay their visas. Or now a lot of the flow is coming from Canada. Or, there are people getting across, but not in the numbers that they used to. I remember when I was growing up, I would see lines of people on the border fence. We're talking about 2000, 2001. Just lines of people just on the border, just peeking in, Mm-hmm. Some of them would go, and the Border Patrol car would come closer, right. And then other guys would go through, and there's one Border Patrol guy trying to catch all these guys. That's not the case anymore. But people still get across.
Prediction for Mexico.
The U.S. will have to do some sort of armed intervention in Mexico in the next 5-10 years, probably.
What would that armed intervention, how do you think that would manifest itself?
It would manifest itself in some sort of issue or incident where U.S. interests will be affected by, I think, resources or some sort of incident.
Like lithium mining and Chinese or something. But we're going to saddle up and go in there at some point. And
I don't think you're going to do it with the permission of the government if things go as they're going politically down there,
with the permission of Mexico.
Yeah. Mexico has a very, very anti-interventionist kind of policy. Mexico's traumatized from U.S. interventions in its history, We have this whole national pride and also trauma of getting a lot of our land being taken from the U.S.
It's funny. I talked about pride. I've talked about recently with Dr. Drew. I keep saying, I don't think pride's a good thing anymore. I think it's fucking a lot of people up. I think when I talk to individuals that have pride, they're fucking horrible. They have horrible lives. I have no pride.
Well, that's a good way to think about it. Yeah.
When I think about cultures that have a lot of pride,
well,
I think it fucks them up sometimes.
Well, one thing I've said a few times, and a lot of people say, the worst enemy of a Mexican is another Mexican. I've been fucked over by Mexicans up here, not by Americans up here mostly. And again, Mexican pride, but not if you're intervening with my way of making a living. Now, do
you think there's ever a future where Mexico and the United States just meld into one? We just get rid of the border and we just become.
Yeah.
I always said, take all the Jews from Israel and move them down to Baja. And let's.
Baja itself is just a giant desert. Just. That seems like Israel, That's what
I said. Look, for those who have not been up and down that coast, it's some of the most beautiful real estate on the planet. Baja, Palos Verdes, Malibu, it's all just the same coast. Yeah. It's the same shit. It's beautiful blue water.
One thing I think people don't understand is the size of it.
Right.
People don't understand the size of Mexico, specifically Baja. The peninsula, that's a giant place. And it's a place where you can go into Pacific Ocean, walk in icy mountains if you go up to the observatory, the Picacho Mountain, and then walk down and see the whales in the Sea of Cortez all in the same day, right? That's one of those places. But it's down there, so it's scary.
All right. The website is edsmanifesto.com. You can shoot him a tweet, Instagram at edsmanifesto as well. New articles coming out in Skill Set and Off the Grid magazines. This has been really interesting. We should do a part 2 of this because I feel like there's so much more to get into with you, Ed Calderon. Anything I'm missing here?
No. Big fan. Used to listen to you on some long work nights. In a van somewhere in Mexico.
Who knew Loveline was pouring in to FM at Baja California? Yeah, 91X. He heard me on the X. You can go to AdamCarolla.com and find out live shows. Hilarity's coming up tomorrow in Cleveland, and then 2 shows, and then 2 shows Friday, 2 shows Saturday in Indianapolis at Helium as well. Just go to AdamCarolla.com for all the info and sign up for the newsletter, CarollaNewsletter.com. Ed, this has been a wonderful slice, and we'll do it again. Keep us updated.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So, till next time, Adam Carolla for Ed Calderon saying mahalo.
Follow the Adam Carolla Show on Twitter at Adam Carolla Show. Follow Ace on Twitter at Adam Carolla. Leave us a voicemail at 888-634-1744. And get your tickets to see the Ace Man live at AdamCarolla.com.